Welcome back to the world of cinematics. Today we have a fun episode. We're going to be talking about book adaptations to movies and TV shows and all that fun stuff. And let's see. Who's going to start first? I think
I could start first
all right.
because it's my favorite movie and book adaptation. It's considered among some probably the king of movie and book adaptations. And that is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you know what his middle names are, please comment below. But it was done by Peter Jackson, at least the popular one. There's also an animated version, which honestly isn't too bad as far as following the story, but the execution not nearly as good as the Peter Jackson version. And it follows the 3 books, 3 different movies. There's extended editions. Probably the only biggest complaint I've heard as far as adaptation goes is that there's no Tom Bombadil in the first book, the first movie. And another complaint I've heard is that the Hobbit should have fought Saruman back for Hobbiton, which it's debatable. Depends on what kind of story you're going for. Tom Bombadil doesn't really add too much as far as the story of destroying the ring goes. And as far as the Hobbits taking back Hobbiton from Saruman, that would have been an interesting story to show how they left as people just trying to do the right thing to coming back to an evil and learning to defend their home from said evil. It really would have distracted from the goal that Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh had in mind, which was to show that the Fellowship was able to overcome evil, even though they're divided. But any comments from you guys? I don't want to take up too much of the time. I know we're all Lord of the Rings fans.
Well, I think I forget the name in the books of the burning of the Shire, when Saruman takes over the Shire. I think that's a good example of adaptation because, the point of an adaptation of a book to film or book to television or whatever it is, isn't to take exactly what happened in the books and put it in the movies. It's not to translate, it's to adapt, to change so that it retains, the spirit of it, the essence of it, but because it's a different medium, sometimes changes do have to be made. I think in, the medium of, literature where you're reading, you are able to flesh that out a little and have that, for the themes and stuff. And, because you have the extra time, you can say, and then after they saved the world, the story wasn't over yet. Here's another thing that they had to do. But in, granted the Lord of the Rings are long movies, but even in a 3-hour movie, you can't really have, they saved the world, and then they had some other stuff that they needed to take care of. It would have ruined the flow of it, but the removal of it didn't change the spirit of what the book was trying to get across. And so I do think that was a good, change that was made in adaptation. There are some filmmakers who will sometimes have a big climax, and then it'll keep going. Like James Cameron does that a lot, but that's very difficult to pull off. And I mean, unless you're James Cameron, usually not a good idea to try it. Peter Jackson, I would argue, is a better filmmaker than James Cameron, but that is something that, no other filmmaker can do as well as James Cameron. So I don't even know if he could have found a way to push that in there. And if he had, everyone already was complaining about all the endings that Return of the King had. That would have, that was another thing that, the adaptation, trimming down the endings, it did work in its favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to comment about that, cleaning up they would have felt like the maid, as Mr. Incredible felt. Just clean up this mess, and you get it all messed up again, and I agree. It would have been harder to put that in. Not impossible. I would have to say if they were to do something like that, it would be like a TV show. But as far as 3 films with 3 hours, I agree. It's an adaptation, not a translation. But any thoughts from either you, Stefan or Robert, about Lord of the Rings?
just in the people who worked on the films, the very fact that they all gave a crap about the book and the lore, and they took it seriously. That's seen in any of the bonus features that you can get your hands on. I highly recommend exploring those. Especially if you don't like the Peter Jackson films, I highly recommend looking at behind the scenes. You may not like the films, but the dedication is certainly there. What really impresses me about the films is if you look at Peter Jackson's work prior to Lord of the Rings. If I was older back then and you told me Peter Jackson, the guy who made Brain Dead and Meet the Feebles, is going to take on basically a Catholic writer's
It's like the Nerd Bible.
Yeah, the Nerd Bible is the fantasy epic of this age and mythology as well. And that he was going to get his hands on it. I'd say, really, that filmmaker, the weird New Zealand filmmaker who has a lot of boyish, kind of immature humor, gory films, stuff that I'm not really into. But the fact that he was able to do that and do that well, and the writers and the producers, just the collaboration there is so well done, and they really did care about the book and not just making it Peter Jackson's thing, but being faithful to the book as well. With, obviously, it's an adaptation. For instance, Merry and Pippin are different than they are in the book. They have more of a personality in the film, and they're comedic relief. So I think all those things were to the betterment, especially a book audience versus a film audience. It is the king. They did very, very well.
Yeah, and I've only read or listened to the first 2 books. I guess 6 books, I guess.
Well, you've gotten through most of it then, because most of Return of the King is actually appendices. That was another change. The actual story portion of Return of the King is pretty short. They did. It was a smart decision to take some of Two Towers and put it into the Return of the King.
Yeah.
Okay, see, I didn't know that. I still plan on looking at the book just because I really did enjoy the first 2. But it's definitely one of those books where I had to go through it a few times to catch everything, because there is a lot. And so I got to give props to Peter Jackson. It's like, how do you take stuff out and then put stuff in to make it all still make sense? But I do have to agree, Aaron, Tom Bombadil was cool and all, but he could put on the ring and not be affected by it. How does that pertain to destroying the ring? It really...
He has thematic and symbolic importance, but nothing to the plot.
Yeah,
unless he's going to do it himself.
Mm-hmm. And I think with Tom Bombadil specifically, the only thing he's done for this story was get the hobbits away from that tree in the old forest and get them out of the Barrow Downs.
But if you take out the tree and the Barrow Downs from the films, you don't need it.
Yeah, it does not affect the plot at all.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because I was going to say that one thing that you think about, this world is so big. You don't need to have everything in there. Like J.R.R. Tolkien was just like, what if I created my own world with different languages?
Yeah, he started with languages before world, and then world before story, and story before characters.
Yep.
He definitely took an unorthodox route to telling this story.
He made the ultimate D&D campaign.
Right. In fact, that's what a lot of people think is, if they died and went to heaven and wanted to play D&D, he'd be the dungeon master, because...
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's how expansive he is. And not to cut this off short, and we could honestly talk about Lord of the Rings all day. We are big fans of the films and of the books. And if we sound tired or kind of look tired to our audience, sorry about that. We're filming a little later than we usually do. So I do apologize about that. But if we want to go ahead and move on to our next book, because we will dedicate, if the listeners would like, more time to each of these adaptations. But we're just going over what is good.
Real quick. So if there any of the books that we talk about today, if you want an actual full episode on it, put us in the message in the comments, or you can also let us know at Twitter at @of_cinematics. And if we get enough looking at, you want us to talk about one of these books for a full episode, let us know, and we will do it. I already had one request for one of the books, but we'll go ahead and we'll be there in a bit. Go ahead, Stefan. Are you doing Jurassic?
Yep.
I'm doing Jurassic Park.
So with Jurassic Park, what's brilliant about this adaptation is it's very much an adaptation. It takes, one might say it takes liberties, but in my opinion, those liberties were necessary, especially when you have Steven Spielberg helming it. The book is very different than in tone and in certain characters. For instance, certain characters die. Originally, Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum. He was originally supposed to die. He came back in the sequel, but he was supposed to die. Hammond was supposed to die, and the hunter Muldoon was supposed to live. But the liberties that are taken, I think, were given a blessing by Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park, in that it had to work differently than the book. And he worked with Spielberg, and they talked about how it could be interpreted as a film. Spielberg opted for a more optimistic approach. Hammond in the book is not an optimistic person.
It's kind of like Steve Jobs.
He's a businessman, first and foremost. He's not Walt Disney, whereas in the film he's portrayed more as the Imagineer rather than the strict businessman who wants to get things done.
Like, he's still interested in profit, but, he wants to make sure that everyone can afford to see dinosaurs.
Right. It's about the wonder and the spectacle, not so much about, I'm playing God right now, and, I might have messed it up, but I will fix it because, I'm God or whatever.
That's what the lawyer character's for.
Right. And apparently in the book, the lawyer is kind of a stud, actually. He's not a coward. So there's some things that they changed, but overall, Jurassic Park, there's no disputing that. It would be interesting to see Michael Crichton's book adapted a little more faithfully. It would probably be rated R because there's a lot of evisceration and disembowelment and things like that. But overall, the adaptation is great. It has that wonder, it has that optimism, it has, but also has that critique on, okay, just because you can, should you? And I love Ian Malcolm's, what he says at the lunch meeting that they have, where he just says, you took the work of other people, and then you didn't have the discipline to obtain that for yourself. You just took what other people had figured out for themselves, then you packaged it, and you're selling it, and you're selling it, and you're selling it. And that's kind of how I feel about the Disney Star Wars, but I don't want to go into that.
That's why
if you want to rant, let us know.
But that's the only way people will hear me on the microphone is if I rant. So, but anyway,
there's a quote for you.
Yeah. So overall, it's well done. I watched it in the big screen during the pandemic. Oh my goodness. Excellent sound design. Perfect puppetry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I want to comment about is for a lot of these adaptations, they have to push the technology. In fact, that's one of the reasons why, even though it's not a direct adaptation or a translation as we're calling it here, it definitely deserves props just for the technology it pushes. We complain about CGI, or some older generations complain, CGI always looks fake. And I'm like, well, claymation doesn't always look good either, and you can go back and forth on it. But the truth of the matter is, for something like Jurassic Park and its sequels, they always look good. Regardless of what one you look at, it looks great, and it's because of that first film. Is just like with Lord of the Rings. If you look behind the scenes with Steven Spielberg and his crew, they put a lot of care into it. They want to make sure that when you see the dinosaurs for the first time, you think, that's a dinosaur. Like, you've never seen one in your entire life. closest thing I had to a dinosaur was Barney as a kid. But when I saw parts of the Jurassic Park film for the first time, I thought it was a documentary. I didn't know what a documentary was, but I thought, oh, this is really happening. These are real dinosaurs that these people are looking at. And that was intriguing to me. And that's something I've learned as I've looked into the books a little bit more, is he also has that level of detail in describing them. And there's some differences, and that's okay, because had the book not given these details, the movie wouldn't have had the details that were put into it as well. And that's why one of the reasons I think it's a great adaptation.
It's interesting you talk about the technology. That's an instance where the tone almost had to change as they changed mediums. Because you've been able to read about dinosaurs ever since humanity discovered dinosaurs. And so the book was able to get away with a more cynical tone.
Yeah.
But then when you are seeing, like, it's so perfectly done, those are dinosaurs. You can't help but be captivated and filled with awe, and this is incredible and wonderful. You can't really tell a cynical story, but also try and make you feel these things. And so changing the tone, but keeping the story, it was able to have it be seamless and perfect.
Absolutely.
Well,
all right, Robert, do you want... Oh, go ahead. You're
yeah. And like Stefan said about Lord of the Rings, is that it helps that you have a bunch of people who are super dedicated to it. And I think the same thing kind of applies to Jurassic Park, because that is when they did major animatronics.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
I remember watching, for those of you who know who Corridor Crew is, their video Artist React, they actually brought that up. It's like Jurassic Park has a great combination of CGI and animatronics to give you that real feeling. So being able to take a book, make it visual, and not just show you what happens in the story, like an adaptation, but it brings you into it by providing as realistic as they can get without actually trying to make a dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what really makes... Because I haven't actually read the books, but I have seen the movies. My dad's a huge fan, so I've watched them. And it definitely has more life to it than Jurassic World.
Yes, absolutely.
Because of the dedication, that, like, same thing with Lord of the Rings. People, and I feel like that's what makes a great book adaptation for a movie, is that people are really dedicated.
Right.
It also helps if the author is still alive and can kind of nod his head in approval. Like Michael Crichton, I haven't heard him ever complain about it. So that's usually a good sign, is if the author's like, okay, there's some changes, but overall, well done,
Yeah, and that's one of the things is, as we continue onward with each of these adaptations, is sometimes that is very much the case. It's great to have the author there, but as we'll see with maybe a couple others, maybe not so much, and we may not bring that up in this discussion. There'll probably be more in our bad adaptations, but that is something that is usually true, is when the author gives enough material to work with, and if they're still alive, it really does help. It can really help influence, but once again, it does depend on what the studio is looking for and what the director's vision of the story goes for. But with that said, we can go ahead and move on to the next one. Robert, would you like to do that one?
Yes. Okay. So the reason why I'm doing this one is this little side story. I have read and listened to these books 1,000 times. Okay, that may be almost an over-exaggeration. I've listened to them to a lot because I love my music and all, but because I used to drive all the time for work and I always had headphones in, and they're the only books I had on audio at the time, is Harry Potter. Now, this one we had a specific request to do for a later episode, an actual full episode on Harry Potter. But as far as movies to books go, a lot of people know how this, like, a lot of people in our generation have followed this series, book and to movie. And I got to say, at first I feel like they started pretty good at following the book really well. Up until, I would say, the fifth one, they kind of got a little different from the book. And then the sixth one, they kind of jumped off the rails. And then the seventh and eighth one, they were good. I can see why they put into 2 movies. But everyone has complained about the very ending.
Yeah, everyone who's read the book there.
And I totally agree. But, like, one thing I do have to say, though, like, to give credit to the 6th movie, to the 6th book, I almost feel like the audience did need that little break in comedy. Because going back and listening to the books again, I've realized that it just gets darker and darker.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, you always have those funny, snarky moments from Harry, but that's still not enough.
And there still is, quite a few dark moments in the 6th one, but its change in focus does kind of give you a nice breather before it dives into the darkest part with the final installments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I gotta say this, for the 6th movie, I thought they did a great job with Draco.
Yes.
Like, you get to see the pain and, like, how he's just freaking out about this mission he's given.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, because I actually just finished the book again recently, because I'm going back through, but no, I changed books because of the pitch stop. I'm rereading those. So, but that, like, it was incredible to me just how, what's his name? The one who plays Draco.
Tom Felton.
Tom Felton, thank you. I knew it was Tom, but I didn't know his last name. There's a lot of Toms. But I feel like he did a great job.
I think it's his best performance in all the movies.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. I think he's pretty good in the 7th one as well. I mean, there's not too much you can do with him, but and that's just how it is in the story. But I would agree. Overall, the films, there's a reason they're so popular, and it's not just because they think the actors and actresses are cute or whatever it is. It's not just the aesthetics and the makeup. But it's a pretty great story overall. There's a reason why it became a worldwide phenomenon as the books, for the movies as well, is because it's a good story. It's intriguing. It keeps you entertained. And it's accessible to basically anyone. Unless you're against witches and wizards, which,
yeah,
I get that. For religious reasons, I get that. They're not going to shove dirt in your eye or anything about that.
Not gonna mess with that pile of worms right now.
Exactly. But it's a good story, and you can, if you look into the first 2 films, and I just talk about it a little bit, is you can tell the quality, even with just the CGI, greatly improves from the first to the second one, because they tried so hard with the first one to just get everything to look at least decent. But as soon as it gets to the second one onwards, I would argue, is each film looks better every time. And it's not just because the cinematography is, they have better cinematographers, the directors and such. It's because the standard was there. Because it's one thing to do a passable first movie for a franchise, as we've seen, but the second one has to up the ante, and thankfully the story does, but you can really mess it up if you don't deliver the same quality as far as the adaptation. You can really see that as it progresses with each movie.
I think the strongest part of the Harry Potter movies as adaptations is their casting. I mean, there is not a single character where I think, this person probably could have played them better. They got great child actors who transitioned into grown adults as we watched them through the movies. All of the adults were these classically trained British actors who all nailed their roles. Even when they had to recast with the case of Dumbledore when the original Richard Harris died, I still think, I always forget his name. Michael Gambon. I still think that he was
not
able to do
Ian
a great
McKellen.
job. Different, but still, you watch him and instantly, that's Dumbledore. Not just because he looks like him, but he acted like him perfectly.
Right.
Well, and I gotta say, like,
Go ahead.
yeah. What I got to say about that is that what's the name of the first one?
Richard Harris.
Richard Harris. They both Dumbledores had characteristic of the book Dumbledore.
Right.
Yeah.
Just the different sides of Dumbledore. There's the kind, fatherly side.
Kind of like, love, Harry, love.
Then there's the other side that's like, I've made mistakes and I've been a terrible person and I'm trying to atone for that, but I'm still struggling to not do terrible things so much. I'm trying to practice what I preach and it's hard.
And Stefan, I swear, I thought you were going to be like, you got the kind, fatherly one. Love, Harry, love. And then you got the, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
That's the one moment that's just out of character. And because it is so, that's the one moment that's glaringly out of character. It has become a bit of a meme because it's just, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Right. And that's more of the director's choice. And maybe Michael Gambon was the one who instigated it. But regardless of how that was handled, I would say that overall, he's still a good Dumbledore.
Yeah, I think Richard Harris does the mannerisms and kind of the attitude, and he would have gone on to do well if he had lived. And to explore that other side, because he is that great of an actor. But Michael Gambon was the Dumbledore that we needed for the later years, especially 5 through 7. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that fight against Voldemort in, sorry, he who must not be named, or Tom Riddle, up to you. Like, if that fight against Tom in the Mystery of Magic, in Order of Phoenix, I don't think Richard could have done it.
He's one of the greatest actors of all time, but maybe
due to
it's the
age,
fact that I haven't seen him do it. I'm sure he could have done it, but I don't know if he would have been able to do it as well.
Well, I mean, what did they do? They just
right. It's not necessarily the the fight of it so much as the all of a sudden he becomes so serious, and there is this note, a few notes in him of I pity you. I used to think highly of you, but now you're kind of pathetic in my eyes. There are a lot of layers to the performance he gives in that fight before they start pointing their wands as hard as they can.
Sure. I think Richard could do it.
Right.
Because, what did Michael Gambon do? All he did was, it is not how you are different. It is, or whatever he says.
It's not how you're similar, it's how you're different.
Yeah, it's like...
Well,
okay.
I should probably rephrase. I'm thinking age. I think physical capability.
Right,
I don't think he would have been able to pull it off. Now,
there's always stunt doubles. I mean, Christopher Lee certainly wasn't flailing about fighting Nazgul in
The Hobbit.
The Hobbit.
Yeah.
That was obviously a stunt double.
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about. That was totally him. With an electric guitar in the background, he's playing it.
But no, overall, good films.
Mm-hmm.
Good adaptations. Everyone hates how they handled the ending, but
very faithful adaptations.
And I got a couple words to end this. Alan Rickman as Snape. Boom. That's all I have to say.
That's all I have to say. It's good.
It is frankly perfect.
Somehow he managed to be even more perfect and more faithful than Kenneth Branagh as Gilderoy Lockhart, which is rips.
Harry.
It's the fact that he could manage the nasty side and the more complex side of Snape as well.
Yeah.
Whereas Gilderoy Lockhart is really not
layers,
he's not that deep.
Yeah, he's not a one-note character. He's a two-note.
He's a two-layer cake there. He's not the
delicious cake, but simple.
Absolutely.
He's vanilla.
But so we'll talk. We'll probably have another episode specifically on Harry Potter.
We will definitely more into that one.
Stefan's right. We should move on.
We'll move on from the whimsy and wonder of Harry Potter to the cold, stark, dark reality of The Silence of the Lambs. Now, this is a series of books. It's not called The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know if they have an official name for the series, but it's a series of books written by, I just had his name, Thomas Harris, I think. And the thread that connects these books is this serial killer who's in prison for the majority of these books, called Hannibal Lecter. He's this brilliant psychologist, but also a serial killer and a cannibal. And he's one of the greatest villains in all of fiction, but I read these books when I was in high school, 2 of them at least, and there's a lot that you can get away with on the written page that is appropriate, for a 16-year-old, reading that, like, oh, someone has been killed, in the more darker, more gritty, messed up parts, someone has been kidnapping women and, making a skin suit out of them so he can feel like he's a woman too. You can read that on the page and understand, okay, this guy, he's evil. This guy, he's not like, I want to take over the world, but this is, in a lot of ways, what real human evil looks like. But it's one thing to read those things, and a very, very different thing to see those things. The books could be read by a 16-year-old, and, I wouldn't recommend them to, like, a 12-year-old, but a 16-year-old, they can handle that. I would not recommend the movies to a 16-year-old. I would not recommend them to an 18-year-old. They are for very mature audiences. Not just mature in the sense that, hey, I want to make a skin suit for myself so I can look like a woman, but they're very... Something about seeing it as opposed to reading it, it changes the whole, the paradigm of this is a cold, dark world where good does not always win. Just like in the real world, we know good will win in the end, but until it gets to the end, evil gets a few wins in there, and it's a great case of choosing what to pick to leave in and what to leave out. Like, a lot of people make a big deal over the fact that Hannibal Lecter in the books has the most developed sense of smell in the world. He's like Wolverine from Marvel, and he has 6 fingers on one of his hands. Those things don't matter. What matters is his ability to dissect you just with his words. Just by looking at you, he can understand you, he can help you, or he can hurt you, all with his words.
Absolutely. And that's something I've seen I haven't seen the full film. I have seen bits, with Anthony Hopkins, of course, playing, Hannibal, thank you, Hannibal Lecter. And it's a really great performance. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. You feel uneasy, and he has a slight accent that isn't normally his own. It just adds a lot more to the character. And it's true what Jed was saying is, you definitely don't want to watch this if you're not really mature and able to understand that you're going to see some pretty nasty stuff. It's not like watching Macbeth and having a lot of catharsis
No.
when afterwards. It's definitely, there is evil out there, and you need to be aware of it. And
even the moments of levity are still dark.
Yeah.
Like, there's a great joke at the end of it where Hannibal Lecter, this cannibal, is talking on the phone and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go now. I'm having an old friend for dinner."
The cannibal jokes.
That's as happy as it gets in the whole story.
Yeah, cannibal jokes, you gotta eat them up or you don't, but you're welcome. Boo. Cancel.
Aha! Aha!
You know what I hear every time?
I agree there.
I hear dude looks like a lady every time you mention of how he's skinning to become a woman. Like, that would make a movie lighthearted.
Yeah, so
as he skins them, dude looks like a lady. Puts on lipstick.
Oh, no, I don't want to think about that scene. Oh, God.
Real quick.
Again, it's not just what you see that's mature. It's the way that it's presented and makes you feel. It's like, this should be seen by somebody who is not innocent anymore, who already has realized that the world is not always happy. You don't always get happy endings, because there are some things that you see in it, and in the book you can read it and realize, oh yeah, things like this happen. But when you see it, you're like, this is how things are. It's very different.
We are looking at you, people who watch serial killer documentaries on Netflix.
And there was also something that was captured in the TV series Hannibal as well. Just that was a little less realistic. It took its time to make, like, a lot of the murderers were focused on making things beautiful and artsy, which, is something that sometimes happens with serial killers, but not certainly as often as that show made it seem to be the case.
Right. Any thoughts, Stephen?
First, I just want to say a few words. And then
That's going to sound great on audio.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. We should pinpoint this time in the podcast and just tell people to turn their volume all the way up. Other than that, I understand that it's a very well-made film, and it got I think it was the 1991 Academy Award and everything. And after Jed just described all this darkness, grossness, weirdness,
dude looks like a lady
and stuff, and the very fact that it beat Beauty and the Beast for Best Picture, it kind of makes me want to go to the Academy and be like, I understand it's a well-made film, but you sick puppies, what's wrong with you?
Any other year, I would have supported Beauty and the Beast to win. It really says a lot about the movie that it beats that.
Right.
It's like, the happy, upbeat musical type,
it's magical. It's perfect.
Or the dark and somewhat gross, disturbing, and gritty, realistic film, or Beauty and the Beast. And it's like, the Academy, well, what's more excessive? What do we like? I like the joke about cannibalism. Let's go with that, yeah.
I've always wondered what it'd like to be skin a human.
It's also the rare movie that, because the Academy Awards don't happen on, like, January 1st, they usually happen in February. It's one of the rare movies to come out before the Academy Awards of the previous year. It came out, it was like late January, early February, and then won Best Picture over a year later. I think it's only been done twice, maybe 3 times, and one of those times was Silence of the Lambs.
Well, it must have sat well with the Academy.
I actually think, had it come out closer to the Academy Awards, I don't know if it would have done as well. It's the sort of film, it's very difficult to forget. It stays with you, and you keep thinking about it.
Right, absolutely. And that's something I've noticed, just because it has infiltrated a bunch of other films. You like something like The Office? You remember when White cut off the dummy's face? That's a direct link to Silence of the Lambs. You've seen The Simpsons. They reference it all the time.
We'll talk about it in next week's episode, but Zemo in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that's Hannibal Lecter.
Absolutely.
Lightweight Hannibal Lecter. He's like the light beer of Hannibal Lecter.
Both are Eastern European villains who, are very villainous behind glass or in a cell. Yeah. But, we'll talk about that more next week.
He's the diet evil. This quasi-evil.
I know what you guys are talking about. He was a great dancer.
I never thought I'd see that. But again, we'll save it for next week.
Yeah.
Oh, I freaking loved it. I actually rewound it just to watch it again because it made me laugh.
Seriousness.
But next episode.
Yeah, next episode for sure.
Let's move on to something cheerier and with a happier ending.
Hold on, before we leave the light stuff.
You have to say happy ending on that.
Happier ending.
Happier.
Before we leave that, Jed, what was it you said about that you didn't know about the novels? About the books?
I couldn't remember the name of the author. It's Thomas Harris.
Yeah, okay, because I looked up the novel. It's like, it goes Red Dragon, The Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Rising. But
I haven't read Hannibal or Hannibal Rising, but I loved Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs, and I would recommend them to people who understand what they are.
Yeah, not meant for everybody, for sure.
All right. Yeah, last thought on there. All right, happier note.
Somewhat.
Who's
yeah.
doing that one? I ain't doing that one.
I'll touch up on that one. I'm not afraid. Ask away, Bridge Keeper. I'm not afraid.
What is
Someone
the
get
plot?
this man a tissue.
The plot of The Bridge of Terabithia is about two kids growing up in, I believe they're in elementary or middle school.
Yeah.
Growing up.
Small town, elementary school.
This new girl moves in, and all this wonderful things happen as she develops a relationship with the main protagonist, Jess. And they create their own world in the woods, and they have a lot of fun.
Fictional world. It's all
Right.
make-believe.
And they're just playing this whole time. And
About imagination and friendship.
it ends on a what do you call that?
An absolute downer.
It is a downer. I remember I had a teacher, I think it was in maybe 4th grade, read the book to class. And I just remember the description of Leslie, which is the name of this girl who moves into town, how Jess wasn't sure if it was a boy or a girl because she had short hair. She ran faster than all of the boys because they're at that awkward age where
I run faster than you. I'm
We're-
more popular than you.
right, and where girls can actually do that. So, and where even in some cases they're getting taller than the boys and they're stronger than the boys. But she's like a bit of an outsider in the class. But with Jess, they become friends. They create a bond, and then it ends on a bit of a downer. But it helps Jess to grow up, and it helps. I just remember the impact when I heard what happened. I was like,
Yeah.
oh. And that's exactly how my mom reacted when we went to the movies and we were watching it. And then it's like, oh yeah, the rope broke. And she's like, oh.
For those of you who don't know, we'll spoil it. Leslie dies at the end. And it's not even that, we watch her tragically die. No. He's gone doing something else, comes home and is told, your friend is dead.
Yeah, she died.
It's a very, unless you've had that happen to you, it's a very ugly thing to happen. Like, nobody wants to see that happen, but to just be off, minding your own business and then hear one day, oh yeah, this person is dead. They're gone. Yeah. It's, what?
Right.
What happened?
It pulls a fast one on you. You think it's going to be about, like, the power of friendship and imagination, but the story is about learning to cope with death and how to, remember people, but also move on.
Yeah, and I don't know as far as the book adaptation goes, but as far as the film goes, it does a really good job of showing how to deal with survivor's guilt. Because Jess, as described, he wasn't there. She was going to do something. She was going to add some more stuff, and the rope that she swung over broke, and she falls into the river and dies.
Hits her head, gets knocked out, drowns in the water.
And, it's a very sad thing, and he went to church with her, and it turns out she's not much of a church-going type. And they have this conversation in the film as they're coming back from church. What happens if you don't believe in God or if you don't go to church? Well, then you go to hell. That's the response. And so as he's going through this emotional time, trying to figure out things, it's a really well done scene. His father comes to him and he sees that he's freaking out and, he's really upset. And he says, it's my fault she's dead. If I had been there, I might have been able to help, or she wouldn't have gone. And, he's blaming himself for basically an accident. It has nothing to do with him at all, really.
And because he sees it's his fault that she's dead, and, because she wasn't baptized, he's now thinking, is it my fault that she's in hell?
Right. Now she's there in hell and burning forever, and that's my fault. And Dad says, I don't know too much about God and things like that, but I don't believe he would let that little girl burn forever in hell. It's a really touching moment, whether no matter what side of the religion fence you are on. It's something that Jess needed to hear. It's something that kids in general need to hear when, or anybody for that matter, when a tragedy befalls a friend or a loved one, is that just because you survived, it isn't your fault, especially when it was an accident. Life and death it's a circle, it's a dance, and it's something that this film does really well. Is that about the same in the book as well? I haven't read the book.
It's been a while.
I'd say so.
Okay.
Because contrasting it with the Silence of the Lambs that we just talked about, it says, yes, sometimes bad things happen in this life, but it's going to be okay. There's still hope. It's hard, but we can move on. We can still find happiness. Whereas Silence of the Lambs is just oppressive sadness and no hope and cynicism everywhere.
Yeah, it's about, you can lose your innocence. Yeah, bad things will happen, because they will.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still keep your goodness, and when you lose somebody, their impact on you can be a positive force if they were obviously a good force in your life. So, and he chooses to have her, be a good force in his life and a good memory, instead of just, being bitter about life in general. It's like, welcome to real life. Bad things happen. You gotta remain optimistic and positive. Otherwise, you're gonna live in Silence of the Lambs. So. And nobody wants.
But yeah, any other thoughts for you, Robert, on that, or are we good to go on to the next?
Yeah, I haven't read the book. I have seen the movie, and same thing. Saw that scene. I was like, "Excuse me."
Yeah.
Say that again. Say that again.
Okay, that's actually an adaptation we should have added, but we'll have to do it another time. Holes.
Oh my gosh.
Holes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dang it.
Well, it's funny because we were talking about we were talking about dark movies.
Yeah.
I thought of The Boy in Striped Pajamas.
Oh no.
Great adaptation, but
It's terrible. It's terrible, but like it is a good adaptation. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, like we said earlier, comment if you would like us to talk more. I definitely would love to talk more about Holes, but
yeah. Okay, Holes is way better.
Off the top of my head, like Jojo Rabbit or Die Hard, lots of ones you wouldn't think are book adaptations.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Witcher.
How to Train Your Dragon. Oh gosh,
yeah,
very different.
Oh yeah, How to Train Your Dragon. I forgot that was
even a book.
Yeah, Jumanji, Polar Express. So yeah, now we're listing all these happy ones, but whatever.
We had to get ourselves pumped up for something.
Yeah,
right.
At some point.
Especially since this next one could be debatable.
Bittersweet at best.
Bittersweet, maybe.
Yeah, now we're moving on to Blade Runner, but I don't know much about that. What the freak is that laughing outside my window? That is creepy as all get out. I'm going to close my window.
Your
One
guess
second.
is as good as mine. So this last one is going to be an interesting case where only one of us has read the original source material, and only one of us has seen the adaptation. So you want to lead off with this off?
Yeah, so basically, I'm just going to give a really wash and rinsed version of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That's the original title. You can see that it's very different from the book.
Story.
It was a short story, but then it got adapted to a novel, which is the version I did read.
Okay.
And I gotta say, it's an interesting concept. I don't know how much animals play a role in the movie adaptation, but what is interesting is that to have a live animal in this dystopian society, I guess I should have described that. It's a dystopian society, and where a lot of people have left Earth and they're living on Mars and other planets, other civilizations. And those who are left on Earth are dying from radioactivity, so they really can't leave. Some people are more fortunate than others. They can live pretty decent lives. But what defines you in society is whether or not you have a real animal. And so the goal is in life, even if it's a gerbil, if you have a live gerbil, then you're succeeding as far as society is concerned. So the main character, Deckard, is a policeman, detective, and he's been assigned to find these androids that were created off-world that have managed to make their way back to Earth. And he's trying to find them and flush them out because they're malfunctioning. They're thinking for themselves. The problem is that they are so lifelike that it's really hard to tell who they are, if they are human or not. and there's a test to determine if they are human or not. It's kind of a faulty test, as we learn throughout the novel. But basically, he does eventually get them all, and he does get rewarded with an animal. And like I said, this is a really condensed version. But he does feel changed because he begins questioning reality, which is the basis of the book. Is what is life, what it should be considered life, and things like that. Personally, I didn't get too involved with it. I wasn't, and not because it wasn't well written, not because it didn't have interesting characters. It had all of that. I just have trouble identifying with toasters that are designed to look like humans. So, but that's the rundown. Jed, if you want to give us the movie adaptation, maybe any differences you can see.
So the overall plot is very similar. There isn't anything about animals in Blade Runner. I mean, there's a guy who leaves origami animals around everywhere he goes, but that's the closest thing there is to it. One of the biggest changes is that Rick Deckard, as he's hunting these replicants, they're called in the movie down, these replicants, they aren't robots, they aren't androids, they're artificial humans. They are organic, but they were manufactured by this corporation called the Tyrell Corporation. They don't go into how they managed to do that. They do a little in the movie's sequel, but it's still mostly left up to your imagination how they were managed to, create synthetic artificial humans. But they do still have, a 4-year lifespan. They have, programming, kind of like the clones in Star Wars, so that, they're given different purposes and meant to, just do that purpose and then die after 4 years. But these 4 replicants have come to Earth, and they're not just malfunctioning, going against their programming. They have specifically come to Earth to try and hunt down their creator, essentially their god, and they are there to ask them, to beg him, give us more than 4 years of life. They love life too much to have it be gone in 4 years. And, Rick Deckard, he hunts them down, and he kills 3 of the replicants. The 4th, he manages to catch up to him, but, like I said, these different replicants, they have different purposes in society, like, they might be a manual laborer, or they might do this, they might do that. This one is a combat model, and so he is able to not only not be killed by Rick Deckard, who's played by Harrison Ford in the movie, he manages to put him on the run. He starts chasing him through an abandoned building. This replicant, his name is Roy Beatty, he is so close to death. He loved life more than anything else. The actor who portrayed him wanted him to have a sense of poetry, a sense of humor, all these different things that make us human. And you get this great performance as you feel that he loves life and everything that makes it up. And as he's chasing Deckard throughout this building, he gets to the top and he tries to jump across to escape, and he gets to the next building, but he starts slipping. He's barely hanging on. This combat model, perfectly fine. He jumps across, looks down on him, and he says, it's quite a thing to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it's like to be a slave. And you think this is he's the villain, he's going to let him fall, but no. He grabs him, picks him up, saves his life, and sets him down. And in a monologue that, just about anyone who's seen the movie can recite by memory, he sits him down, and in this replicant's very last moments of life, he says, "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I've watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die." And then he just dies. So it's a different kind of question that was posed by the change from robots to artificial humans, where with robots it's what is life? What do we define as life? But with artificial humans, that change becomes something that, becomes more applicable to us, and I think helps the film be better and, more resonant, more affecting. It becomes a question of, what life do we value? Do we value our lives? How do we treat people around us? Do we value their lives and respect them? At the end of this movie, Deckard has realized it's wrong to hunt down these people just because that's his job, because they're artificial. He runs off with this, this replicant girl who's this new model who may live longer than 4 years. That's, it's a question, but he doesn't know. There's some question in later cuts because this movie has been re-released 1,000 times. Maybe Rick Deckard is a replicant. I don't like that idea, but that idea is out there that, who are we to say how valuable someone else is when we might be just as valueless as they are, as worthless as they are. But if we have worth, then so does anyone else.
So yeah, I can tell you that it's pretty similar as far as the plot from what you've described.
Like the bare bones of it.
Bare bones. But the way Deckard is described, I would not have chosen Harrison Ford. As far as the tone, because he's more of a thinker.
Yeah.
Not that Harrison Ford couldn't be
Sure.
in his films, but during when Blade Runner was made, and even kind of the tone, while it is noir, it has a little more action than what is provided in the book, from what I understand.
Right. And well, he definitely was playing against type, because this came out in 1982. This is right after him being Han Solo and Indiana Jones, and he was going to be Han Solo in Return of the Jedi the next year. These are, hi, I'm a very charismatic character. And in Blade Runner, he's a broken guy. He's kind of depressed. He's quiet. He doesn't really know how to relate to people anymore. His occupation of just going around and killing people has made him a sad, lonely, quiet person. And so, no, it's not the sort of thing that you typically cast Harrison Ford in.
Right.
He's able to pull it off well, but even then, it's a different character than as written in the book. I don't know if I would have cast book Rick Deckard as Harrison Ford either.
No, and that's the thing is I've heard people, in fact, I read this for English class, science fiction, that he loved both.
Yeah.
He loved both, and that's kind of the consensus I've gotten is if you like the book, you'll probably like the movie as well, because it does kind of leave that question of, what is reality? Is it possible that he could be a replicant? Because, like I mentioned, they have a test, and it's not a test that, they can just, download something into you. It's more of just a verbal question type of thing.
They add a little to it in the movie where it's like, we're going to have a camera focused in on your eye to see how you react, but it's again, I'm going to be asking you these questions and just judging you based on your response.
Gotcha. So yeah, it's very similar then as far as that goes as well, but I would say definitely a different change of tone from what you described, but overall, it sounds like it would be a good adaptation as far as a broader audience. Because that's the thing with science fiction novels. If you actually read a few of them, most modern audiences would not get into them because Star Wars kind of redefined that for the modern audience. And that's okay. I got nothing against that.
Most sci-fi literature is very niche.
Yes. It's more like classic Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
If you like that sort of stuff, or even kind of the later stuff with Next Generation, you'll probably get into it. But
it's not a lot of Sturm and Drang. It's very, let's think about this. Let's talk about philosophy through the lens of science.
Yeah.
I require elaboration.
Exactly. It's more of that, for sure. And there wouldn't be a big fight leading up to that between the characters. It would be, I'm standing in it would be a chess. It would be a Sherlock type of Moriarty conversation going on, which is interesting, but not for most audiences.
It can work, but especially in a sci-fi setting after Star Wars, if it's sci-fi, audiences will want to fight or something leading up to that.
Yeah. They want to see science doing really cool stuff, killing people.
Right. Which even then, in the movie, it's, like, there'll be a chase or something like that leading up to the killing of a replicant, but then not a big fight usually. It's just, I pull out my gun, I shoot you, you're dead.
Yeah.
It's very cold and clinical to kind of show how little they value these lives. It's not like, oh, look how dramatic it is. It's just, no, they're dead. Move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of how it is in the book, too. Like, it's definitely a noir.
Yeah.
Science fiction, which you don't see very often.
It's the epitome of future noir.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a little more of that, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that is pretty untapped. There's a few out there, but...
Now, I don't know if this was something that was introduced in the book or in the movie or not, it has been criticized many times for being very, very boring. Not just, like, oh, this is like, talking about philosophy and it's nerdy and stuff. I don't get into it, whatever. But like, there are sequences where nothing is going on. Like, a man is staring at a camera screen, thinking. Enhance. Zoom in. Enhance.
That's the only part Stefan has seen of this.
It's very easy to make fun of that part, but there are quite a few moments in the movie that do slow down the pace as well. Is that something that was in the book, very, very slow?
I would say it's pretty slow.
Okay.
It's attempting to do world building. And even for me, there were times where I was like, okay, get on with it.
Right. Because that is one thing, the world building in the film is incredible because for the most part, it's kept in the background or done through like the camera, what you show instead of people saying things. There are a few instances of like, hey, let's tell you about this world, but very rare. That, when George Lucas was designing Coruscant for the Star Wars prequels, he based the look of it off of what Los Angeles looked like in the movie Blade Runner.
Right. And that's something that we've seen through most of these movies, especially the science fiction and fantasy, is a lot of that world building is just shown by what is shown on screen. Sometimes you do need to explain a little bit, but overall, you can tell just by looking at it, oh, this is a city in the future.
And that's one of the strengths that film has over book is the ability to show instead of tell. Books, of course, have their strengths, the ability to slow down and show you what a character is thinking. They're different mediums with different strengths and weaknesses.
Right, and it's harder to introduce, especially if you don't know what, for example, a fissile is. If you're not familiar, that fissile is another term for atomic or working with atomic material. You're going to be like, what? Why do they keep mentioning this?
Yes.
And that's kind of the way it is with science fiction in general. And that's part of the reason why some would find Do Androids Dream About Electric Sheep kind of a more boring story. Is because it does use terms that are scientifically correct.
Lots of technical jargon.
And a lot of technical jargon. And that can really drive you away.
So
but I think we've gone over this maybe enough here, but you had something, Robert?
No. I was about to say we may need to cut this here in a second.
Yeah.
We've gone a little over time.
Yes, we have.
So, does Stefan have anything he wants to say real quick?
Oh, sure.
Sit your ass.
Just like pause for a second. Enhance.
No, Rutger Hauer, who plays the replicant in Blade Runner, does a very good job. That monologue that Jed recited, highly recommend it. I just thought of the idea because I think both the book and the film are up for interpretation, individual interpretation, like how do you view this?
Yeah.
And the way I view it from what has been described by both and what I understand is that it's basically about us as humans and are facing death. How are you going to face death? Deckard is death. He runs around, he kills people. Some people run, some people fight, but eventually they're going to die. And it is when Rutger Hauer's character chooses to accept death, bring him to his level and say, you know what? I've lived. I've done things. I've seen things. He dies in peace, and then death respects him.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
And that's the way I see that film. It's like, death. He's kind of bored. Death is run around and kills people. They fight. They resist. He's kind of. He doesn't have a special person. He doesn't really respect people. But it's until he sees somebody who's like, no, life has been good, and I could fight you. I could resist you, but I'm going to choose instead to embrace you because I know who I am and I know what I've done. And he dies in peace. And then death is like, I got mad respect for you now because you actually are the first person to show me. And there could even be with my interpretation, there could be religious undertones with that as well.
Well, there are very heavy-handed religious overtones. In the
Okay.
film.
Yeah.
So so for me, it's like, okay, you could easily compare that to Christ, because it's like death. Christ is like, I know who I am and I know where I'm going. And then death is like, respect, you're gonna live on in some form.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just how I interpreted what they said, how I understand what I do know about the book and film. So those are my food for thought.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for watching. We'll go ahead and close out now. Who wants to say the first line?
All right, I'll be the fall guy. I'll be the patsy. I'll say it. Smash that like button, okay?
Oh man!
Share and subscribe.
Yes,
as well.
And tell your friends.
And what was the
and your enemies?
What was the comment? Like,
so for the comment,
yeah,
for the comment down below, what is your favorite book to movie adaptation? Let us know, and we could even do an episode on it.
Yep.
And also,
absolutely.
for those people who want to listen to audio on the go and they don't have time to hop on YouTube and watch the video, you can feel free and go to anchor.fm/the-world of cinematic, well, WOC. And you can also listen to us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, or Radio Public. So that's for our audio. And then also, we got our t-shirts, got all of our links down below in the description. So after you hit the like button, and subscribe, and you make your comment, feel free and hit those links. You can help support us. We can get better equipment if you support us, and we can get better tech to make this show a little more nicer to look at.
Better toys too.
Better, absolutely. And by the way, we are working on coming up with other videos as well. So we're not just going to have the Muggling with Vernon series up. We're going to try and get some other series up. So if we get support from you guys, we'll be able to make that happen. So thank you once again for listening, and we'll catch you next episode, which is going to be the next 2 episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier. All right. Bye.
Bye.